Hi, good morning. This is Michael Bittel with the Adirondack Regional Chamber of Commerce. We hope you're having a great day, and I want to welcome you to a conversation with your legislators. We're excited to have you here. We are, of course, recognize the difficulties of these times, but we're very excited about how so many people in our community, both individuals and businesses, have certainly stepped up to get us through these tough times and get us to a better place where we're going to come out at the end in a much stronger place. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today and like to welcome the elected officials that we have on the line. Several of our members have written in questions ahead of time. I'll be asking these questions and probably some others to our elected officials who will be on the line. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Mark Shaw from Stec for hosting this today. That's where we're calling from. And I'd also like to thank Jesse Jackson and his crew from Look TV for filming this today. I'd like to start off today by welcoming Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Congresswoman, great to have you. Would you like to open up?
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you to all of the members of the Adirondack Regional Chamber of Commerce. We have worked with almost all of, I think, the members throughout this crisis, and I'm looking forward to answering the questions. Just a brief update from the Washington perspective. We are in the midst of negotiating an additional bipartisan package. This would be on top of what was the CARES Act, which provided increased funds for the Paycheck Protection Program, as well as the EIDL program, which has been significant for the small business community in our region. As you all know, many of the questions that we received from our local employers helped us work with Treasury to update some of the guidance when it comes to seasonal businesses. So those were your ideas that I was able to take to the Secretary and Deputy Secretary of the Treasury and get those updates. So we are continuing to work to bring your concerns. I'm also working with the county and regional working groups focused on the reopening, which we know is critically important to do so safely, but also to provide that economic lifeline to the region. Regarding the next bipartisan bill, one of the aspects that's very important for New York is state and municipal aid. Our counties have borne the brunt of this, and the New York delegation has been united in a bipartisan basis to include that in any bipartisan bill that we send to the president's desk. One priority for me that is critical is making sure that our counties have access to direct funds. In addition, our hospitals we've been working very closely with, including Glens Falls Hospital. I've announced over $100 million that have been delivered directly to hospitals in my district. But we know that hospitals like Glens Falls are facing unique challenges and circumstances. And I had a call yesterday with the hospital and the Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services to address the need for increased funding for our local hospitals. So thank you very much, Mike. I'm looking forward to the questions, and it's always great to be with my colleagues in the State Assembly and State Senate who we've worked with as a team.
Congresswoman, thank you so much, and a lot of praises to you and your team for helping us through this time. You, as always, have been so accessible to us at the Chamber. And you certainly listen intently and follow up, more importantly, follow up with solutions and action to get things done in D.C. So thank you so much for being here today. We also have on the line Senator Betty Little, Assemblyman Dan Stec, and Assemblywoman Carrie Woerner. Betty, are you there? And would you like to say a few words?
You know, we're busy and local government is very busy. Everyone is trying to work towards meeting these benchmarks so that we can begin the reopening process. It's a difficult time and it's stressful for everyone. We have businesses that don't know what the end game is going to be, how they're going to survive this. We have all kinds of people in difficulty, but you know, I think that working together, we can get to this new norm, and it is going to be new. So from here on, be interested in trying to answer your questions. There are new issues every single day. And the one thing I can say about what's going on is it continues to change. So I think that the issue yesterday was the was the requirement for nursing homes to do 2 tests a week on staff and on patients. I believe that's being walked back, which it needs to be. It takes away too much time from the care they're having. So anxious to hear from everyone. Thank you.
Senator, thank you for all your help and for your leadership. I know that you, the Assemblyman and the Assemblywoman, have been all over the district and fighting hard for our businesses. I know all 4 of you are on the same page that it is going to take our community and our individuals and our businesses to see us through this and work in partnership with the government to get us to a better place. So thank you for all of your attention, all 3 of you at the state level. Thanks for putting up with me again for my phone calls at all hours and my emails at all hours. But I do have to give you a lot of credit. You've been so responsive on every single issue we've spoken about. And before we do start, I do want to give our 3 state reps a lot of credit because a lot of mandates and a lot of executive orders are put out on a daily basis. And oftentimes, because things are changing so quickly by the minute, there aren't clarity or answers that can be feted out right away. And I know on the state level that Senator Little, Assemblyman Stec, and Assemblywoman Woerner work hard to find those answers and or help us define them. So we have worked in partnership with our 3 state elected officials to help with guidance, to help with clarity. And some of those changes you're seeing are the effect of these 3 folks at the state level. So thank you so much for joining us and for you supporting us and serving your constituents so well. I'd like to dive into some questions here. Our first question is for essential employers with employees that do not wish to go back to work when requested, what are the rights of the employer? This is actually, out of all the questions we received from our members, this probably was the number 1 question, which aligns with when you take New York State UI, unemployment insurance, and federal UI, which has been bumped up to $600 a week through July 31st, it's tough to motivate some people to come back to work. So again, the question is, for essential employers with employees that do not wish to come back to work when requested, what are the rights of the employer?
I will answer this. So generally, if a laid off employee is receiving unemployment benefits and they are offered their job back at a similar salary, this is considered suitable employment. And if they turn that job down, they may become ineligible for the unemployment benefits. And I know that from the owner's perspective, in terms of your finances, I just want to answer how this will impact the PPP loan forgiveness. We're working with the Treasury Department to make sure that we have a final forgiveness rule. We had a call yesterday with officials from Treasury urging them to publish that as soon as possible. I criticized and said, this is too late. This needs to be certain on the front end of the 8-week clock that starts for the Paycheck Protection Program, but we are working to get that out as quickly as possible. They have put out an FAQ, which is what they're using for guidance, that has stated that they are going to address this specific issue in the forgiveness rule, and that laid off employees whom the borrower offered to rehire for the same salary and wages will be excluded from the loan forgiveness reduction calculation.
Fantastic. I do understand, Congresswoman, that from the House Democrats, that there is a proposal to extend UI, the $600 through the end of the year. While I think the intention's good, that could also add into the challenge of getting people back to work. So it's a really tricky road to go down. But thank you so much for your help on that and your attention on that. Congresswoman, do you have a timeline? I know we're in negotiations right now for what you started with. Is there a timeline in DC to try and get another package out?
Yes, in the coming weeks, I am optimistic that we will have a bipartisan package. And remember, we are in divided government right now, so you have to have a bipartisan proposal. What has been very frustrating is, despite the fact that you have members from, states like New York, Washington, New Jersey that have been hard hit by this crisis, Speaker Pelosi has not reached out to Republican members. So the bill that she has been introduced has had no bipartisan input. And I want to focus on delivering bipartisan results. And that's going to take compromise and negotiation. So I anticipate that in the coming weeks, we will have a bipartisan package that will include funds for state and local aid, which is really important for New York, but it will ensure that you have input from members all across this country and, frankly, all across New York State, as we have been impacted differently in different parts of the state. So weeks, not days, and not months.
Congresswoman, and this also is to the of course, the state representatives on the line. One of the other large concerns for our businesses is liability, and it's a huge concern of the chambers. A liability on businesses should somebody go into a business and then leave, and then the business gets blamed for transmitting COVID. Which in and of itself would be probably difficult to prove in a lot of ways. Is there talk in DC, and then also for our other three guests, talk in Albany about liability protection for our businesses?
Well, I think it's generally important that Congress and elected officials live by the same rules as everybody else, and every workplace has been impacted. Whether you think about the positive cases in the House of Representatives, where members have tested positive, or you have positive cases in the United States Senate. So every workplace has been impacted. I firmly believe that businesses and manufacturers that I talk to in my district are making good faith efforts to ensure that they're updating their operations to have a safe and healthy work environment for their workforce. So I think it's going to be very important that if businesses are taking those proactive steps to increase their hygienic practices, to make sure that they are social distancing, to use masks when they are not socially distant. Those are going to be really important to make sure that businesses feel safe to go back to work and hire their staff back.
Yeah, we have posed this question and have not received an answer yet. But I really believe that no one is forced to go into any business. And as Elise said, every business, when they open, are going to be working really, really hard to make sure that everyone is complying for the safety of their own employees, as well as those customers who choose to go into that building. So I think the biggest problem we have right now is the unevenness of you can go into Walmart and you can buy clothing and everything else, but our small business clothing stores, like the ones that are in downtown Glens Falls, they're not able to open, and yet they probably never have more than 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 customers. And everything can be achieved. I mean, we can even get started with appointment only, or, for the libraries, allow so many people in per hour, and they select an hour that they're coming for. We've got to get started on it, and we have to do it carefully. But I don't understand, the liability issue if somebody willingly goes into a place. But we're looking for an answer from the officials.
Hey, I just wanted to add to what Senator Little just said, because she, at the end started talking a little bit about liability again. Just big picture-wise, in a normal world, following the normal legislative calendar, we had 7 legislative days left before the end of session. I do not see us going back into session in the next 3 weeks. So as far as liability goes, I don't see anything legislative happening there. But beyond the actual legal liability, I think the other thing that businesses are listening on the call are probably already aware of, but I think it's worth just reminding everybody that you also have the perception issue. If you want people to come back to your business, they have to feel safe. You know, I mean, I just can't imagine everyone rushing to the restaurants as soon as they open again, because I think there's going to be a certain percentage of the population, 10%, 90%, I don't know, that are going to be hesitant. They're going to be reluctant to go in until they're confident and they're comfortable. So I think that everyone needs to, for its own sake, follow whatever the protocols are, because that's what's going to be required to stay open. But I think it's also important to we need to make sure that the public feels comfortable going back to business. Or an open economy is just an open economy on paper if the public isn't comfortable.
Mike, could I jump in? This is Carrie.
Please.
As well on this question.
Please.
Following on to what Dan and Betty have both said, I think that the advice that I have been sharing with the sort of the downtown business groups that are in the district that I represent is that the consistency matters. So get together as a group and come up with a set of standard operating protocols that everybody's going to follow in that merchant area, so that no matter which door a customer walks in, they know what to expect, and they can have the confidence to know that their trip to Greenwich or their trip to downtown Glens Falls or to Saratoga Springs, they're going to have a consistent experience, and they're not going to leave having caught the virus from any of the businesses that they went in. And then to the point of sort of what is the state doing about this, my understanding is that as we roll into the various phases, 1, 2, 3, 4, the state is going to put up on the New York Forward website a set of best practices that businesses in each of those industry groups should follow. And rather than, you know, for a while there was some conversation about businesses having to submit a reopening plan and get that approved, and that clearly was not a workable approach. So my understanding is, and I think this may still be a little bit in flux, but I think this is where it's going, is that the state's going to put best practices for each industry up. Business owners are going to be asked to develop let's call it a COVID mitigation plan in accordance with those best practices, to have that on site, to implement it in their businesses, and then to sign off to say that they have that. And so by establishing a plan, executing against a plan that's all based on industry best practices the state has advised, they think that will limit the transmission of the virus, and as well, I think, provide some foundation for defense against any liability lawsuits.
Thank you so much for all of your input on that. Having worked with so many of our businesses here in our region, I can certainly tell you, and I know you're all aware of this, every business wants to make sure that they're safe, not only for their customers, but also, of course, for their employees and for their families. So again, my biggest concern is, despite the best efforts of everybody, nobody wants to be at the minimum threshold of cleanliness and safety. I'm sure all of our businesses are working towards exceeding those expectations. We're just worried about the legal liability in this sue-happy society that we live in. We want our businesses are already hurting enough, and I know all four of you are aware of that. We just really don't need another challenge put on to the challenges that are already going on. So I know you're all aware of this. Whatever we can do to support our businesses on that would be most welcome. Along with that, Assemblywoman Woerner, you had mentioned about the turn in the plan. And I'm going to throw that out there. That's another big question that we've received as there's a lack of clarity from the state what's going to happen. We certainly know, and we're working with all our businesses to develop plans. The best practices from the state will help. But Assemblywoman, if I heard you correctly, there really won't be a depository to turn in a plan for a business. Is that what I heard you say?
That's my understanding. As of when I asked the question over the weekend, that was the answer I got. So that's my understanding. Now, as we all know, these things have been changing on a daily basis, and The senator made mention of the fact that this is a moving target in so many ways. But my understanding is that's the way the state's going to manage the process of planning for reopening.
As Carrie said, things change and there isn't a need to pass in a reopening plan as they first proposed, but there is a need to have one, and the consistency is most important. And I have heard from a hairdresser, which I desperately need to get back to, is that their organization has put out guidance and plans as to how they could open safely for themselves, their employees, and their customers. And I think that if every group, convenience stores, retail, they all have organizations, and maybe that guidance that they work with and they implement in their business would help them be ready and be able to open as soon as we get the green light.
Well, I'd like to share with everyone on the call and anybody listening that the Chamber is also a resource, as well as EDC and others that are here for you to either help you with the guidance, get you to the right place or the right organization, as the senator had mentioned, either on the website for the government or a business organization that's really supportive of your industry. We're here to help. So whether you're a member or a non-member, don't hesitate to call us at the Chamber. We'd love to help you and have us all be a great success. I'm going to keep moving here. There's another one that is a lot of questions from a lot of our members, and I receive calls daily on this. PPP, Paycheck Protection Program. It seems like almost on a daily basis, the rules are changing, which makes businesses nervous. And I know our guests here on the phone know that in the absence of information, it adds angst, it adds grief, it adds further challenges. Our businesses are so robust and our people are so robust. Even if it's bad news, they're willing to take it, but at least they'll know an answer and be able to accommodate it. One of the things that's been challenging is our seasonal businesses. And some of our businesses don't start till, because of the state or just naturally on Memorial Day. There's an 8-week period on PPP, and a lot of these seasonal businesses don't ramp up with their employees till that weekend or June 1st. Is there a possible extension on PPP to go beyond June 30? Congresswoman, I would submit that to you.
Yes, thank you. We've been working with many of our businesses to address their concerns on PPP. Just so there's a context here, this is the largest economic rescue package, and there were more loans written in the PPP program from SBA than there were in the last few years by the Small Business Administration. So just to talk about the scope, this was significant in ramping this program up. There have been challenges, and as I mentioned earlier, we had a call with Treasury and SBA yesterday where it was a number of members, including myself, who were pretty tough, saying that this is difficult for businesses with all these changing guidance and rules and FAQs. On the flip side, we have been able to make incremental progress for seasonal businesses in terms of how they calculate their eligibility amount for the PPP loan. Regarding the 8 weeks, that was written into the law, so that's not something that Treasury can change administratively. That would have to be updated in the additional CARES package, and I do think expanded flexibility for how to use those funds, extending that 8-week period would be the right decision to do, because particularly businesses in our region that are either seasonal or have been forced to, for all businesses, been forced to close and they're non-essential, it's sort of a catch-22 in terms of that 8-week clock. So we are looking in the future legislative package to updating that legislatively, but that's not something that Treasury can do on their own. On the loan forgiveness guidance, which I know is very important because businesses are utilizing these funds, we have absolutely pushed Treasury to get that final rule out there so there can be certainty for the business community. And that one of those rules is the 75% goes to payroll. That wasn't in the law. That was a regulation written by Treasury. So we are waiting, and we will work with the Chamber to get out that information as quickly as possible with the final guidance on the loan forgiveness aspect.
That would be great. We really need that. There's quite a bit of angst out there, as we've discussed, and I know you're well aware of it. Thank you for keeping us updated on your calls with Treasury. And then also the need to change this. The fundamental foundation actually needs to be changed in Congress. Parallel with that, the EIDL loans. The SBA just opened those back up recently, but it was just for ag. Congresswoman, do you have any information on when that might be able to open back up for all businesses that are in need of loans? Because we're in a vastly different place today than we were a month ago. So while a business may not have thought they needed a loan a month ago, a lot of businesses need it now to carry them forward.
Yes. So EIDL is another area that's been very frustrating. As you recall, on one of our earlier calls, there was a challenge in getting these loans out the door. They did turn them around in about a week for the most part, and we started getting feedback that businesses were getting access to the EIDL funds. That was depleted, and we, in the CARES Act on April 24th, Congress provided another $10 billion for EIDL grants and $50 billion for EIDL loans. As for the status, this also was brought up yesterday. Congress continues to be frustrated by the lack of communication or transparency. What I've been hearing from the SBA is they are continuing to struggle with the volume of applications, that some of the delays have unfortunately continued. But we need to continue our congressional oversight and urging of the agencies to get these funds out the doors to businesses that need them. So once again, we will be partnering with the Chamber to put out updates as we get that clarifying information from SBA and Treasury.
Thank you so much. So from what I understand, there's still a hangover from the original EIDL loans before they closed them down. So they're still trying to get EIDL loans through from the first batch. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's, many of our businesses have had success accessing the EIDL loans, and we're working with businesses that are continuing to face challenges getting those loans processed. So while many businesses are appreciative of that lifeline, we are also trying to address those that are concerned who have not been able to work through the bureaucracy that we are helping to try to get an update as to their status.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Question for our state representatives. And there's a letter that Senator Little and Assemblyman Stec sent last week to the governor, and it's in reference to Warren and Washington counties. And there's been a lot of chatter out there, just to set the framework here briefly, that Warren and Washington County are in the Capital District due to the regional economic development map. And there's been several folks in Warren and Washington County, business owners and community members, that have thrown around the idea, why can't we take Warren and Washington County and push them up to the North Country, in hopes that on the governor's 7-point matrix and metrics that go along with that, that we would more so fit with the North Country as opposed to Albany in a lot of ways. Senator, do you have any thoughts on that and follow up on that great letter that you sent down to the governor? Assemblyman?
Yeah, you can. Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for bringing up the letter.
What?
Betty's on. But go ahead, Senator.
I'm sorry. Just if I could, I wanted to apologize in the beginning to Carrie that we didn't ask her to be on the letter. We were considering more northern Warren, Washington County. But let me address why we're not in the northern region. Take a look at the map for the Northern Region Economic Development Council. It goes from Lake Ontario to Lake Champlain. It is enormous, enormous territory. When you look at Warren, Washington County and where our employment is, the employment that is not within the county is usually south of the county in the Capital District. So for that reason, it was okay. Our hospital, their tertiary hospital is Albany Med. So we are centered more towards the Capital District in many, many ways. Until you get into our tourism business in the north, then we're more like the North Country. We sent the letter knowing full well that they weren't going to change the districts, but we also asked for a sub-region. But I think that we are doing okay. Ryan Moore, Warren County Manager, Administrator, is on that committee. Warren County has met all 7 of the benchmarks, I believe, or we are very close. And so are the counties in the Capital District are working hard at that. The testing is increasing, and you no longer have to have symptoms or be symptomatic or say that you have been near someone. You can actually walk in and ask to be tested in many areas, many different facilities, the hospital, the healthcare, all of the tests that we do in nursing homes, they are also counted. And that has been the problem area in Warren County, is our nursing homes, because they're congregate, because they don't have the money to have all private rooms in nursing homes. They've never had the reimbursement rates they should have. They have an aide taking care of several patients at once, 7, 8, 10 at one time. And they don't need as much care as somebody in a hospital, but they still need the care. And they are, just by their living circumstances, just as you and I are with the people we live with in our house, we are, in danger of contaminating each other. But I believe we have it under control. They are actually only talking about the deaths that take place in the hospital, I believe, although things change. They double testing of nursing homes twice a week, I think, is being looked at and modified. But, I think that our group is working really hard, getting their plans together, and certainly everybody that's on this phone call needs to be getting their business ready to go as soon as we can. And we've got to even it out. You can't say that you can shop in Walmart and Target, but you can't shop in a local clothing store or many of our local stores, retail stores. So there's a lot of confusion on this, but we've never done this before. This is a first. I hope it's a last, but we know that's not possible, but we're getting there.
Hey, Michael?
Yes, sir.
If I'd like to just also apologize to Carrie Woerner for I didn't think to ask her to sign on to the letter either. I think I too was focused more northern, and as Betty pointed out, if you look at the map and Washington County, certainly southern Washington County, I mean, you're really starting to get closer and closer to Albany there. And there's a lot of questions that sprung out about why are we in the capital region. And again, you look at the statewide map. 8 years ago, the governor divided us into 10 economic regions for a whole different purpose. Had to draw the line somewhere. And yeah, that's just it. I mean, you start drawing these lines, and how big do you want the North Country to be? So I think at the time the lines made sense, but there were questions back then 8 years ago. Hey, why aren't we in the why are we in the capital region, not the North Country? The lines are what they are now. I think the governor has already indicated that he doesn't want to change the lines. That's understandable. I mean, I'd rather him focus on reopening than trying to figure out how to draw these lines. But I think our letter, the point to our letter was, hey, even within a region, you're going to have parts of a region, counties that are farther ahead. And that's true here, and that's true all over the state. What we want as safe and as efficient and effective and quick of an economic restart as we can, because the economic realities are that all these programs that people are about to see get cut by double digits, that takes tax money to run them. To get rid of those cuts, we have to have a revenue, and to have a revenue, we have to have an economy. So the governor's trying to strike that balance, and you get 3 people in a room, you're going to have 3 different places where to set that balancing point. So maybe sometimes some would say he's not being aggressive enough. On the other hand, he's trying to balance public safety. So, we're all working together, but I think that the gist of our letter was that certainly Warren and Washington County's numbers merit a more favorable look. They're much more in line with what we're seeing in the North Country. But the good news is that I think both the capital region and the North Country are making progress towards meeting all 7 of the criteria. I think the North Country, good chance that they will meet the testing requirement, which is the only one that was still holding them up here by the end of the week. And Warren County, or the Capital Region, is into one more requirement that is trending good. So Capital Region conceivably might be a week behind the North Country. So again, not the end of the world if we're a week behind. But the whole thing here is to make sure, I think our message was heard, that, hey, it's not, let's be careful of a one size fits all. But again, I wanted to just also circle back and, and one other question that did come up on a few calls yesterday, it might be worth pointing out now, is there was some confusion whether or not if we don't make the reopening 7 criteria on the 15th, do we have to wait 2 weeks? Is there a 2-week wait before we can reopen? No, as soon as a region meets all 7 requirements, they can reopen. So if the Capital Region meets everything Sunday, then they can reopen on Sunday. So I thought that's probably something worth pointing out to the group as well, is that as soon as the region meets all 7 criteria that day, they can start phase 1 reopen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And a point of note, 2 things. One, the North Country is not opening on the 15th. That's correct, right? It was Mohawk Valley, Southern Tier, and Finger Lakes. Is that correct?
Since I represent the counties in the North Country, we are working hard, and we are confident and optimistic that we will meet the metrics by the 15th.
Right. We're not there yet, Michael, but we should be there by the end of the week.
Well, and I want to thank you so much, because 3 weeks ago, several of you on the phone worked hard with the Adirondack Chamber and the Saratoga Chamber to push forward on not a one state proposal, open or close, as the governor originally had said, but a regional approach, and then also a business by business approach. So thank you for your partnership on that. Just to go back to one more thing, on the EIDL, there's a question here on the chat room. It says, I was contacted by residents about those that applied and have been denied for credit reasons. So this is EIDL. I heard that was not the case for PPP, and I wondered why the difference, as so many are struggling with credit impacts. Is this accurate, and is there any way to send information to them to address this? Number one, and Congresswoman, I'll put this to you in 2 seconds here. Number one, anybody feel free to go to AdirondackChamber.org. We have a COVID-19 response right on the front page, right at the top, a drop down. And within that, there's actually a chart that shows the differences between PPP and EIDL, not only for creditworthiness, but loan types, interest rates, amount of deferment. PPP has a 6-month deferment, I believe, and I believe EIDL has a longer potential deferment, but a higher interest rate and a longer time to pay back. But Congresswoman, anything to add to that, PPP versus EIDL?
Yeah, not knowing the specific circumstances of the businesses that the questioner had heard from, I would refer them first, definitely look at the Adirondack Chamber resources, but second, please reach out to my office. All of our casework is confidential, and we are able to provide specific answers for each business's set of circumstances. But the PPP program and EIDL program, we tend to, as we talk about these relief programs, bulk them together. But as Michael pointed out, they are very different programs with different parameters. So I would refer those businesses to please get in touch directly with my office, and we can help work through the specific concerns, because every business is different, and we've just found that every case is unique.
Thank you so much. We're nearing the end of our conversation here, but there's 2 more questions I really want to get out there. Number one, what is the current status of the Saratoga racetrack opening this year, with or without fans? Assemblywoman Woerner, I'm going to let you take that since you were a neighbor of mine in Saratoga County for years.
Thank you. The Saratoga Race Course accounts for about $1 billion of economic development or economic activity in the capital region overall, and of that, about 60% of it is driven by race fans who are participating on taking their picnics at the backstretch and so forth. what we have found is that that right now they're training 1,300 horses at Belmont. They've got about 1,200 people working, 600 residential and 600 who come in from the community every day. And what NYRA has done is put in place some really strong protocols to protect the public health of the people who are working at the track and the horses. And so what they are proposing right now is a shift from training to racing at Belmont without fans. And it's worth noting that a good 70% of the handle at Saratoga, at least, comes from off-track sources. So the racing could be successful, probably unique among the sports, with operating without fans. From the perspective of the race participants, the owners, the trainers, the breeders, the jockeys. And so the hope is to get that started at Belmont, to be racing without fans, and then use that as a platform to then shift to the Saratoga meet, bringing the horses up sometime in the end of June in preparation for an opening in middle of July. It will probably be without, if the governor agrees, it will be without fans, at least to start. And the hope would be that with improving public health numbers, that there an opportunity at some point over the 7 weeks of the Saratoga meet for NYRA to open it up to a limited number of fans, maintaining social distance and all of the other precautions that are necessary. So that seems to be the trajectory that we're on. That's at least what is being proposed to the governor, is that racing be able to open first at Belmont without fans, rather than waiting till phase 4, which, who knows when that phase 4 will kick in. But that's where we stand right now.
Thank you so much. In a parallel with that, for our state reps, a question on the screen was, if we're able to go at any point, let's just say we're able to go on the 18th in this region with phase 1, is it 2 weeks later, phase 2? Is that where the dates fall in? And then 2 weeks later, phase 3?
That's correct, Michael. Every 2 weeks, provided that you keep your 7 criteria where they need to be, then 2 weeks you graduate to the next phase. That's what the governor's office has been putting out.
And does anybody have any feel how camping and hiking will be affected in the region?
No, it's got to happen, and people can keep their social distancing. Fortunately, it's not warm enough yet, so we're not seeing the big push, but it has to happen this summer. And so do summer day camps. What do you expect children to do all summer? Go find some place to swim where there's no lifeguard or no safety or no people watching, or maybe not a safe area? People can have a pool in their backyard, and pools are deemed essential workers, so they can all be opened and all of that. It's just so much unfairness in this. As they look at one area, other things crop up. I'm working hard to get ambulatory surgery, because even though the hospital can do their elective surgery now, a lot of people decline to go to the hospital or fearful of that, would rather go to an ambulatory center for cataracts, for colonoscopy, for all those things. And instead, they're putting off having them done. And, there's a safety issue in that too, certainly a health issue, but working on it really hard, because we have some summer residential camps, which are big economic boons to our area, who have already decided to take this summer off.
Thank you so much for that. One of the big questions that we have here is, as we move forward and the businesses open up, the businesses really need guidance on enforcement of social distancing and masks. The chamber's working with, in fact, we'll put out either today or tomorrow in concert with other chambers and EDCs and so many of our businesses, a program to support wearing masks. It's really difficult for our businesses to enforce that. In fact, there's several areas where people aren't wearing masks into businesses when it clearly says right on the door, please wear a mask. If you're going to enter, wear a mask, which That's another thing. It's a simple thing, but I urge all our businesses to put clarity of signs on their doors, what's expected for somebody to come in, a mask, social distancing, if you have the alcohol-based solvents for your hands and so on. But what guidance and what can you say to how can businesses and an employee, I think about an 18-year-old employee that has to address a customer that just won't wear a mask. Any advice that you could give those on the line here?
Oh, Mike, the governor has said repeatedly when asked at these press conferences daily that he is leaving those decisions and that enforcement up to local government, which, on the one hand, it's nice to have local control. On the other hand, it's kind of convenient to pass the buck down and let somebody like a village mayor or a sheriff decide, how to enforce it with their neighbors in town. It's difficult. I was in a local convenience store and I saw guys coming in there, not wearing masks, and you could see people were uncomfortable about it. There needs to be a certain amount of social peer pressure on each other to do it. Even if you don't think it's necessary for yourself, just put your neighbors at ease. It's the polite and responsible thing to do right now. You mentioned, it shows respect, and that's the word that the governor's been using. Just show respect for your neighbors right now. Right now we're in these uncertain times, and people are understandably concerned for their health and their safety, and I just think it's a show of respect. So I think the 18-year-old cash register operator, I think the business owners need to do everything they can to support that young person in their business that works for them by being present and trying as much as possible to enforce it at the door. Hey, if you're coming in, wear a mask. You mentioned hand sanitizer. I want to take this as a quick opportunity to let everyone know that the Office of Government Services, just this morning, right before I got on this call in my district office, delivered 100 one-gallon bottles of hand sanitizer with a pump on them for me to distribute. So if there's businesses that would like to get, and we also have some smaller ones as well to distribute. So if there's businesses that want to get a gallon of hand sanitizer for their business, if you want to call my office or email my office, we will figure out a way to be here to hand off one. And when they're gone, they're gone. But I just got them in today, and they're not doing me any good clogging up my little tiny assembly minority district office. So I want to put that out there that I have it to give away. Thanks.
This is Carrie Woerner, and I would say that I too got a delivery of 100 bottles to my not very large Assembly Majority District office, and I too would be more than happy to arrange for you to pick up 1, 2, however many you need from my office.
Thank you both. Thank you both. Go ahead, Senator.
My office is much larger, but I did not get a delivery. So.
We're sending people to Assemblyman Stec and Assemblywoman Woerner's office then when it comes to hand sanitizer. The last question we have, and then we'll close, is actually I'm going to go with 2 more here. I'm sorry. There's one on the screen. Senator Little, any guidance that you're aware of, or anyone on the call from the state elected officials, any guidance on when we can open up beaches in the region? Today, the state's been deferring the decision.
Right.
Is that a phase 4?
I hope that our beaches will be able to be open by June. And, the other thing is determining when the school year is over too. And when, they no longer have this at-home school going on. But, I think every town, every place, we can do it. You can't wear a mask swimming, but you certainly, if you can play tennis, and they just put that out, that it's okay to play tennis, and it's okay to play golf, and stay away from each other. It's something we have to learn how to do. So you don't hang on each other, and you don't gather in large crowds, but I'm sure it can be done, and we'll continue to work on it and get it going.
Thank you. Thank you. And Congresswoman, I'm going to wrap up with one more question for you. And just maybe something to put in to ask Treasury or to be thoughtful of with a question here that we've received at the Chamber quite a bit regarding PPP again. A lot of our seasonals and a lot of our small businesses, again, are battling with UI pays more than a normal week's salary per se through July 31st. Can a business owner use some of the PPP funds to pay more to entice these employees to come back and not get penalized? Meaning the employer not get penalized through PPP.
Yeah, my understanding is that as long as 75%, and this is the guidance that has been published so far, again, the loan forgiveness portion needs to be finalized from Treasury. But my understanding and the intent from a congressional perspective was to bring people back to work. So I think as long as 75% of that PPP fund goes to payroll, you can go above that, and it would be forgiven according to the guidance put out now. So I don't see a problem with that to utilize the PPP funds to provide increased pay. As long as you hit the 75%, that will qualify you for loan forgiveness as of the guidance today, which, again, I know that's frustrating that and we are pressing Treasury to finalize that.
Thank you so much. We look forward to staying on top of this, continue working going forward on all the issues at the state level, the federal level, and certainly at the county and local level. In closing, thank you all for joining us today, our elected officials, and thank you so much for the members and non-members that joined us today. You are the backbone of getting us through this crisis. Our members, our non-members, our business community, our community as a whole, you are the ones that will get us through this crisis and come out better and stronger in the end. I want to thank you all. Elected officials, just one last pitch, and I love Senator Little, you saying this again and again. We need to get our small businesses and our small stores back up and running. They actually are so dialed in, and in a small area will be able to more than exceed the safety and health concerns that are put out there. I have a lot of faith in our individual businesses. They're revved up. They're ready to go. Let's go. Let's get our capital region where it needs to be. Senator Little, you referenced County Administrator Ryan Moore and his Warren County chart. One thing in closing on that, there is one of those, and I think it's regarding testing, that actually being in the capital region helps Warren County as a whole because of the amount of tests. I hope we can continue to get more testing up here. I think we've got the tracking and the tracing in place to make that happen and make us successful for months and years to come. I want to again thank you all. Thank you again to Mark Shaw at StoredTech. Thank you to Jesse Jackson and the good folks at Look TV. Have a great day. We're going to be better. We're going to be stronger. And we're in this together. God bless.